Hello everybody, my name is Daniel Ahmed and I'm a cloud security architect. Today we're going to talk about another attack path that I've conjured up for you guys. And in this is very interesting because we are using an automation account. We haven't really talked about automation accounts in the channel as of yet. Today is the day we're going to talk about the managed identities that are connected to the automation accounts. And if per se the automation account has access to any other resource in the subscription, we will find out how to exploit using the runbooks that we can run in the automation accounts, what kind of roles we have on those resources other than the automation account. First things first, one thing I need to get off the way is that if you have a contributor role on any resource group that has an automation account inside of it, you cannot necessarily see the roles of those automation accounts on other resources. So what I'm trying to say is if you have a owner role on a resource group, then you can see the automation accounts roles on other resources. But without an owner role, you cannot see the roles the automation account has on other resources. So this comes pretty handy. Like if the user gets exploited, like in this scenario, and he does not have an owner role on the resource group that has the automation account, he will not be able to get the roles that this automation account has on the other resources. For that purpose, there is a very handy little trick that we can use. We can eventually ask this automation account to run a runbook for us and ask it to give us the token that it is using. So we can pretend to be the automation account and then access whatever roles we have and whatever resources this automation account has. The attack path basically has everything that we talked about. We're just going to use the credentials that we have for Alexa B account, and we're going to find out the automation account that we have in the resource group that we have contributor role on, not an owner role. And we'll find out what the token is using the runbook. We'll run a runbook and it'll find out the token and send us the token. Once we get the token, we can simply use that token to log in as this automation account's managed identity. And once we get the access to this managed identity, we can simply find out what other roles this identity has on other resources, and we can query those resources if we have access to them. Now in this attack path, we'll figure out that we also are using a custom role, and this custom role is in the automation account. On the resource group, we have created a custom role just for this purpose, which allows the automation account to run a command inside of this resource group. Any virtual machine inside of this resource group, the automation account can run commands on it. And that's a very common setup. Most of the times when you want to have automation accounts in your subscription, you allow it to run commands on virtual machines. You allow it to access other resources. So this is very basic zero trust methodology. You only allow one set of commands to run on the virtual machine through the resource group. You don't allow automation account to have a contributor role on this resource group. Let's find out how are we going to attack this, how are we going to get the subscription level managed identity connected to the virtual machine. One last thing before we start the demo is this virtual machine actually has a system managed identity that has a contributor role on subscription. This is not realistic in a realistic environment, but what is realistic is a user managed identity. So if we have a user managed identity here, this becomes very common that Azure administrators, they make a user managed identity, give it a role of contributor on a subscription level, and they assign every other resource that requires even a little bit of augmentation or deletion or addition or removal. They assign that resource the user managed identity. We are going to assume that this is a user managed identity because it doesn't really matter if it's a system managed identity. If it has a contributor role, we can assume it's a user managed identity, but it will do the attack paths similarly. It will move the attacker from this resource group and get the access to the subscription level just fine. The attack path is not changed. Let's start. Let me connect to the account first that we got from the phishing. All right, so we can see there was no MFA established, so we got in the account. This is our initial access. We have already done the initial access part. We will touch on it in later videos, but right now we have access to this account and we can simply figure out what roles we have. So this is the first thing you must do when you get a account access. So we are contributor role on a resource group named RG Automation. So we have found out two things now, a resource group and our role on that resource group. So we can further exploit it by using the name of the resource group. We can find out what resources it has. We can simply we just simply query the resources inside of this resource group, Azure Automation, and we can find out that there is an auto account one resource, and there is no runbooks inside of it. You can see we only got one automation account. To figure out what runbooks we can run, we will have to go to the portal and we can see what kind of activity there is. But we can firstly try to get the token from this Azure Automation account, because I will show you from the attacker's perspective what it has. This is the portal, and if I go back to home, resource groups, and I can see the Azure Automation resource group, right? I have this auto account one automation account. Something interesting here is if I go to settings and to identity of this automation account, you can see that the managed identity is turned on, because of course this automation account has to communicate to other resources for the automation to happen. And the reason this automation account is running is because it has some roles on any other resource in the subscription, because it has to automate stuff in those resources. In our case, it's a virtual machine, but we don't know yet because we are trying to figure out as an attacker. We can also see there is no user managed identity attached to it. There's only a system managed identity. So if we check the roles, remember that we are in the attacker exploited account, Alexa B. So if we check the roles, we see that there are no role assignments found on the selected subscription. This is wrong. We actually have some roles, and we will figure out how to get the roles and how to check as an attacker. But in the graphical user interface, it's not showing us because we have a contributor role on this resource group. We don't have an owner role. To figure that out, what we will do is we will actually create a runbook. And let me get back to the attack paths. We will create a runbook and we will try to get the identities token, right? So to get that token, we need to query the IMDS endpoint, the management.azure.com endpoint. This example is just for virtual machine, but we can also do that for automation accounts. We can run a runbook and add the management.azure.com endpoints query in it. It will get us the token. So I've already created the code. Let me just finish this. Write a name for this runbook. Run identity check. Something that the admins won't get distracted from. We can just write any name here. We'll choose PowerShell. We will write 7.2. Its version is completely fine. Running some checks. We're just doing this basic description to make sure that the owners and the admins don't get skeptical about it. We'll leave the tags. All right, so I've already created the script. Let me just add the script here. So what this script is doing, actually, it's saving the management.azure endpoint into a variable, and then it's adding the resource inside of this variable that is targeting this API endpoint. And it is trying this piece of code. If it works out, then it will print out the raw token. If it doesn't, it will just tell us what the issue was, and it will print out an error. Now in the try section, we can see that it is finding out the access token invoking the get method on the header of this endpoint. We can just save this and publish. All right, it will take some time to publish this, and then we can start the exploit. So in the attack path, we are right here. We figure out that we have contributor role on this Azure Automation resource group. And we also figure out that we have an automation account in the resource group that has a managed identity. Now we're trying to get to this managed identity. We're going to find out the token for this. That's why we ran the runbook. Okay, we can refresh this. Okay, we can start it. Just to keep things in check while it's running, we are doing all this because we don't know the roles this automation account has on other resources. As we already know that automation accounts do something in resources other than its own resource group, or it couldn't be in the same resource group as well, but we are going to find out what kind of roles this automation account has on other resources. We couldn't see this in the graphical user interface as we saw. It's completed. Let's check out the output. So you see we got the token for this automation account, and we are right here. We got the token for this automation account, and we are in this part of the attack path, and we can just copy this and authenticate as the managed identity. So let's just copy this and run variable to authenticate as the identity. We're just going to use the access token and specify the variable that we save the token inside of. You can simply name the account ID as something as MI, managed identity, and it will connect us to the managed identity. So get a hold of what we have in this. You can get to AZ context and it will give us this subscription ID and the managed identity name that we saved here. All right, so let's find out what roles the automation account has on what resources. So first of all, we'll find out. Okay, so we find out there are a couple of resources here. All those resources are connected to this Danial Prod 2 resource group, but we are looking for something that we can actually use. So, all right, so we also have a virtual machine. You can see there's a virtual machine IP, public IP for this virtual machine. There is a network security group for it. And this is the virtual machine. So we have a virtual machine inside of this resource group. And there are some migrate services, but we don't really need that. Now, one step we have done, we have find out that what the scope is inside of this automation account. Now we will find out the permissions and roles. So to get that, we'll just find out the role assignments. All right, so we have a couple of roles. Let's take it step by step. Azure Migrate Service Reader, we don't really need that. Azure Migrate Service Reader, again, there is this role VM run command that we really understand that there is no role like that in Entra ID or Azure RBAC. So this must be a custom role. And to find out what permissions it has, we will do it in a couple of seconds. But there is also a role in the same resource group as a reader, so we can read all the resources inside of this resource group as well. That we saw when we are running the resources get AZ resource, we saw all these resources connected to the virtual machine as well. So that is because of this reader role. Now our interest is this custom role, right? To find out what this role is actually doing, although it's very easy to figure out by its name that it's this virtual machine run command role. It allows to run commands in any virtual machine inside of this resource group, but we can still figure out what actual permission this has. So for that, we'll copy this role definition ID and we'll run get AZ role definition. Previously we wrote role assignment, so we found out all the roles, and now we're going to find out the permissions in one of these roles. So that's why we are using role definition. We're going to put the ID, and we got the scope, but the permissions are hidden. So let me just use the convert to JSON format. This way we'll find out exactly how this role is structured. So in any role in Entra ID or Azure RBAC, just find out what the actions and not actions are doing. So in the not action section, there is nothing. So nothing is excluded. Most of the times when you are creating a custom role, you are excluding something from the role's permission. And the actions are basically Microsoft.compute virtual machines run command action. So we can run any command as an action inside of virtual machines in this resource group. So this is the whole idea of this VM run command role. Now, from a perspective of a security architect, this is a very normal thing. We allow automation accounts to only run commands in a virtual machine. We won't give them access to the complete resource. So we didn't give them contributor. We didn't give it an owner role. We only gave it the least possible resource running permissions. But we'll see how we can exploit this as well. Now, keep in mind, we could extract the managed identities token previously using a runbook. We can do something similar like this if the virtual machine is running in this situation as well. From the virtual machine, we can get the token. Now, figure out a way to get the token from the virtual machine. So to do that, I've already created the scripts, but you can screenshot it if you want to save it. What we're going to do is, we can also do this from the CLI, and we can also do this from a runbook. Just like we did for automation account, we found out the identity token. We can also do this with a virtual machine as well. Previously, we didn't do it, because we didn't know the roles inside of this managed identity. As you can see, we didn't know what roles there are and what kind of resource group the roles are scoped to. So now that we know all that information, we can simply run a runbook, and we can do that as well. But I will try to use the CLI now, because if we make another runbook and run it, it will make a lot of noise as it did for the managed identity. It's a log, it's all audited and logged. We don't want to be caught. So let's just use the CLI. And what actually we're going to do is we're going to query the IMDS endpoint, and this endpoint will give us the virtual machines token. Now let's create a script first, put it in a file, and then run it on the virtual machine. I've already created the commands, and I will just show you how it's done. So simply we will put this all payload into a variable, and then we're going to dump this variable into a file. Now this is the whole command. All right, this is a simple command we are going to use, just like we use for the managed identity of the automation account. We are going to use it for the virtual machine. But the different thing is that in this, you can see the endpoint is not going to management.azure.com. It is going to 169.254.169.254. This is a common only IP address for the IMDS endpoint. And why we're using the public IP? Because we are going to run this inside of the virtual machine. As we have access to the VM run command, right? We can run commands inside of the virtual machine. So this is why we have no HTTPS protection, and the public IP address is what we are going to use. This is the IMDS endpoint's IP address. Now we're simply querying the API. If you remember, when we were doing this in the automation account, we had to specify the identity, right? So if I go to edit in portal, yeah, we were specifying the resource, but right now we are just using this. We're going to query the token. It will print out the token once the PowerShell command has run. So let's just save the variable now. Now we are going to create a path that we're going to save this variable, save the PowerShell script in. This is basically telling the PowerShell to create a path for this file and add this file inside this temporary folder. So we're going to save the file locally first, and then we're going to send it to the virtual machine endpoint. All right. Now we're going to add the payload inside of this paths file extract.ps1 using the outfile command. All right, so if you want to see the file where it's saved, you can simply do this, Windows R, and then you can type percentage temp percentage, and you can see that it is right here. So if you edit this, you can see this is the same payload that we saved in a variable that's saved in the file. Now we are going to run it. All right, and to run this, we're simply using az run module, and what we are doing is we are going to invoke the az vm run command. We are going to specify the resource group it has to run on, the name of the virtual machine VM1 that we enumerated on the top, and we're going to make sure that this command ID is perfect, because in the virtual machine, if you want to run any command, you need to make sure that you are using a specific command. It's like an ID for that command. We are going to run this in a PowerShell in the virtual machine. So of course we use run PowerShell script as the command ID. And afterwards, we're just using the script path as the paths that we saved right now. Right here is the name of the file. All right, once we run it, while it's running, let me just show you where we are in the attack path. We got the managed identity a while ago. Now we have the reader role and the VM run command role on a resource group. And now we're trying to run a command in this virtual machine so that we can query the IMDS endpoint and find out the managed identity related to this virtual machine's token. So we will use this token and find out that we have a subscription contributor role. This won't run if the virtual machine is not running. The virtual machine must be running. So it saved the token inside of this result. So you see there is the token. This is the whole token. And right now we cannot actually use this token because it's not trimmed, and we have to extract it first. So in the result variable there is value, and under value there are different things indented as code, level, info, display status, provisioning, it succeeded, that's why it gave us the token. And this message is what we want, so this is the token we want. There's different other things as information, but we don't need to worry about that. We're just going to trim this value indented as message. So we're going to create a new variable as talk, and we're going to, this is basic PowerShell. We're just using the result variable, and we're finding out the value and the message inside of that value. This is the message. Value dot message means it's indented inside of this value, and we're going to trim this. So once we print the token, it will print out this token, so we can copy this. Previously, if we copied this, for instance, let me copy this and show you. This is not the right way to give the token, right? So if we copy this now, it will copy perfectly. So that's the whole reason. Now in a different PowerShell, so what we're going to do is we're going to use the PowerShell to access the new token that we got. Okay, my bad. Now we can see that by easy context, we can see that we have access to this test managed identity that we named test here. Now this is the identity of this virtual machine. So to find out the resource roles that we have in this identity, okay, you can see that we have a couple of roles: contributor role, user access admin, and all these roles, contributor role on this resource, different, all the resources, that resource group that we have, it is showing the roles on those resources. So basically we have the most important role on the resource is the contribution. So basically the most important role here is the resource in this subscription. And how do we know that it's a subscription? We are seeing that management groups, this is visible, and the contributor role on this management groups subscription. So now we have exploited it completely. We found out the resource groups, we found out the managed identities token, and then now we authenticated as that managed identity. Now why this attack works is because most of the managed, why this attack works is because managed identities don't require a multi-factor authentication to authorize. They, if you have a token and if you are authorized to get the token in the first hand, like we discussed in the previous video, where we can forge the JWT and JSON Web Token using the key vault. We can also chain that lab to this lab if we had the access to the key vault that is having the certificate for the virtual machines certificates, authorization, managed identity. We would be able to forge a JSON Web Token also, but in this lab, we found out that we had access, the automation account had access to this virtual machine. As a VM run command, we can find out the token of this virtual machine's managed identity using by querying the IMDS endpoint. We found out that this virtual machine has a role of contributor on the subscription level. So the whole attack path is completed, and thank you for watching. Assalamu alaikum.